Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to For StarCraft 2 Strategy. Going to be taking a look at a solid Terran strategy today. Now in this replay, our Terran player is Fruit Seller. That is in fact what that says. And our Zerg opponent is Dreamiz or Dreamiz or something along those lines. So we're going to go right into Fruit Seller vision. For those who don't know, Fruit Seller is an excellent StarCraft 2 player. Go ahead and check him out in other games. If you just YouTube or Yahoo or Google search Fruit Seller, you should find some information about him. Really solid player. So specifically onto the strategy that we're going to be looking today, it's going to be a really good build versus Zerg opponents. It's going to be that Hellion into Banshee build. I've covered the Hellion into Banshee build before, but what I kind of want to show you here is how to go about doing this build while dealing with some adversity, or basically something that's going to attempt to throw you off your game. But I kind of want to show you how to kind of keep a steady hand, make sure you keep doing what you intended on doing as long as it's still going to work, and just basically not lose your cool. I mean, I know a lot of times, you know, we've got these videos here and you see these build orders and these strategies, but you might get in game and then someone might attack you when you don't expect it, and then you're going to be like, well, what do I do next? We're going to try to show you how to stay the course again, as long as whatever you're going for is still going to remain effective against what your opponent's doing. We're going to show you how to try to stay the course, not freak out too much, and just do what you intended on doing in the first place. Now, the build order that we're going to be looking at is getting that refinery before the barracks. I've talked about this before, and the purpose being so that you can get that 100 Vespian right when your barracks is finished, so you can make that factory almost immediately. So the specific build order is 10 supply depot, 12 refinery, and then 13 barracks, as opposed to 12 barracks and 13 refinery. Now, the drone moving in here trying to do a little bit of harassment, definitely kind of annoying, but we can deal with that. We deal with probe harassment and SCV harassment. Drone harassment is no different. Just make sure you pull a worker off your line to either engage or help repair your SCV that's being attacked. Anything necessary to stop this from taking out the building SCV that's constructing your barracks here. Now, you may notice here, I just mentioned Fruit Seller is a really good player, but you may say, well, geez, Fruit Seller, he's not doing any scouting right now. The reason is because, honestly, this build against Zerg opponents, there's very little that he could do to change our course of action, essentially. Basically, what I mean in saying that is getting a super early scout isn't going to necessarily be necessary with this build, because no matter what your Zerg opponent does, this will still be effective against them, this early Hellion into Banshee build. So as far as the factory timing and the reactor timing there, we got that factory at 17 supply. That was essentially, like I said, immediately when this barracks was finished building. And then we also started researching Orbital Command right then at 17 supply, and at 17 supply as well is when we started building our reactor. So basically, as soon as the barracks is done, you go factory, Orbital Command, reactor, and then once this reactor is done here, lift it off, switch it with that factory, and start pumping out those Hellions. Now, this is kind of the throw-off that I had mentioned. Basically, what happened here is Dream had moved into Fruit Seller's base, and he saw that he had that refinery before the barracks. And that tells Dream that he's going to be seeing a fast factory, and against Zerg opponents, fast factories typically mean that you're going to be seeing a gas-intensive build, or something that's going to tech up into a gas-intensive build. So what he did was he stole our extractor, or he stole our Vespian geyser, so we couldn't build a refinery on it, and he covered it with that extractor. And that's limiting the gas that we can have, obviously. It doesn't take a genius to kind of realize that. As you can see here, that factory swap did happen. We produced our 2 Hellions and moving out there. But basically, the problem with this is that ideally in this build, you're going to want that second refinery early on so that you can get that research for cloak for your Banshees. But because we lost this, we're not going to be able to do that. Now, instead of freaking out and going into a bio build because we only have 1 gas and stopping our production of Hellions, that's not going to be the case. Just keep producing those Hellions, and basically what you're going to have to do is, if this happens to you against a Zerg opponent, you're just going to have to go with the Banshees without the cloak, and you're going to have to deal with it that way. It's going to be really hard for you to get cloak early on and still maintain a constant Banshee production, so your best bet is to just produce those Banshees and not worry about the cloak. Now, as you can see here, we're going to be pushing out with these 4 Hellions, going to be trying to do as much damage as possible. The other thing to note here, too, is that our Zerg opponent was fully aware that this was coming. It wasn't much of a mystery to him. He knew that these Hellions were coming because because of that build order that we had in the beginning, and he had prepared for it. And this just goes to show you that even with the preparation, if you can micro properly, even with roaches on the board early in the game, they're not fast enough to catch up to the Hellions. They just don't have the speed or the range. If you micro properly, you can keep them away. The three big things you're going to have to deal with when it comes to early Hellion harassment, as you can see, a little roach attack here. I'll cover that in a second. With early Hellion harassment, you're going to see either roaches, spine crawlers, or speedlings to deal with. With proper micro, you can basically manage around all three. Now here's something else that I'm going to talk about. I mentioned in the very beginning being thrown off your game. Now we moved out with that Hellion Harass. We've done a really good amount of damage to his economy, but the problem is he counterattacks us with these roaches. If this happens, again, don't freak out, stay on the course, get that Banshee out as quickly as possible. Once you have that Banshee, you're going to have no problem repelling this roach attack. It's not going to be much of an issue. I would strongly suggest also putting another supply depot up here, because the threat's going to be, you know, he pushed out with those roaches. He could follow it up with some speedlings or zerglings in general running into your base, and that could be a bit of an issue for you. At the very least, it's going to disrupt your economy quite a bit. So if you push out with these Hellions to do some economic damage early in the game, and your opponent counterattacks with roaches, they manage to get into your base, don't freak out. Again, continue that Banshee production. Once those Banshees are out, those roaches will be no problem. And it's also a good idea, I would strongly suggest blocking off again if they happen to break through any of your frontal wall off. Now we did attempt to go for an expansion here, the reason being because we had hindered our opponent's economy so much with that Hellion harassment that they were really far behind. So expanding at that point is going to be a good idea. You can really magnify your advantage there if you do that, because again, you set them behind by killing all of their workers with those early Hellions. If you can follow that up with even expanding yourself, you should have no problem defending it due to their lack of economy, and you're going to get a huge advantage from that as well. So you can see here we opened up the game with this Hellion harassment into Banshee. You can obviously see how effective it was. We haven't yet at this point gotten Banshees to our opponent's base because we had to use them to fend off that roach attack, but that's not a problem. Again, in an ideal world, if you didn't see that counterattack, it would have been Hellion, destroy their economy, followed up immediately with Banshees, end of game. I mean, perfectly, that's what you would hope for. But we've dealt with the adversity, and now we're finally going to push out, bringing up these Hellions to engage. We're also preparing for a transition into Bio, as you can see here, with these Barracks. You know, Bio is a very strong mix, and what you can do in going for something like this is you hit them with this composition early in the game, and then after, say this attack was repelled, say he had enough queens and roaches to deal with this attack, he could take out the Banshees and take out the Hellions as well. Switching to this Bio is going to be very strong, because ideally what your opponent would be doing is they'd be reacting to this composition, and if you then hit them with a Marine Marauder heavy build immediately followed, it's going to be very strong as well. And that's just a general concept to consider in your games as well. Hitting your opponent with a certain type of unit or a certain type of composition of units, and then switching to a different one that's going to counter his response to what you get. So again, had he fended this attack off with roaches and queens, which is what he would have to fend it off, if we had followed up with a Marauder and Marine army, we would have easily sniped down those roaches and queens, no problem. So again, something to consider. Now I'm going to go over that build order real quick, what we're looking at here. It was that 10 supply depot, and again, that 12 refinery before the barracks, followed by a 13 barracks. Saturating that refinery right away. As soon as the barracks finishes building, we're going to have enough SBN to do our factory at 17 supply, and then followed at 17 supply as well is going to be an Orbital Command and a Reactor here in the barracks. Do that little switch as soon as the factory and the Reactor are done building, swap those buildings so you have the factory here, start producing those Hellions early on, move out to do some harassment. If you get counterattacked, don't freak out too much, stay the course, try to get that Banshee out as quickly as possible if you're seeing roaches, and then try to get that wall off up again if they do happen to break through it, because speedlings, a roach breakthrough followed by speedlings could be very dangerous, so just be prepared for that and be very mindful of that as well. Something else to note is if you move in and you do significant economic damage to your Zerg opponent, and you feel comfortable, go ahead and expand. It'd be a perfect time to again capitalize on the advantage that you already have. So yeah, really solid build against Zerg players. I suggest all Terran comrades try it out at some point. And once again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 Strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. What we're going to be looking at here is we're moving out with our force. We're going to be pushing towards our opponent's base to try to take them out. We see these banelings coming in. What you want to do is control-click all of your Marines and pull them away from those banelings and then continue firing. Had they stayed on the front lines there, what could have very well happened is the banelings would have taken them all out. I mean, that's what banelings do. They take out light units very, very efficiently.